there's a reason to do it just because it's incredible language and Shakespeare's always worth spending time with. But now there are even more reasons and layers of relevance. And I think while the all-femme aspect of the show was emergent from the audition process, it did become a conscious decision. And part of that conscious decision is to highlight and give voice to people who are often underrepresented.
That was Ava Roy, founder of We Players. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast about artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city unique. In this bonus episode, meet Ava and her friend/co-star, Ann Podlozny. They'll talk about We Players' 25th anniversary this year, as well as their upcoming production of Macbeth, performed by an all-woman and female-identifying cast at Fort Point under the Golden Gate Bridge. Stay tuned for info on how you can be part of this immersive Shakespearean experience. Here's Ann Podlozny and Ava Roy from We Players.
Well, actually, I started the company my freshman year of college at Stanford University.
Okay,
and
heard of it.
It was in large part a response to the campus and the environment. I grew up in rural Western Massachusetts.
Okay.
And had both had the tremendous privilege to grow up in a place that was both very culturally rich. I grew up training with Shakepeare and Company in Lenox, Massachusetts, which is where I met Anne. It's also home to many famous writers and artists, including Herman Melville and Nathaniel Hawthorne and so on and so forth. Edith Wharton. So there is a very rich cultural, artistic tradition, though it is a very rural environment. I graduated with the same 60 kids I'd been in school with since kindergarten.
Wow.
So there was a real deep establishment for me in my own artistic practice and voice as a young person. But then when I got to California to go to school, I felt like I was on this incredibly beautiful but very foreign country club that I didn't quite know how to relate to.
I've never heard anyone describe Stanford so accurately.
And it was a great playground to figure out what I wanted to do, and that my artistic practice was not my weird extracurricular activity. It actually is my life's work. And so while I was there, I started experimenting with throwing banners off the clock tower and tying bodies to the sculptures, and what would happen if there was a production of Romeo and Juliet traipsing throughout the entire campus. And
amazing.
One of the things we found was that audiences would double and triple in size over the course of the show as people would drop what they were doing to follow it.
Amazing.
And I sort of treated the campus as this incredible set and backdrop, but it also gave me the opportunity to, because I was a student, use that experimentation as an opportunity to essentially outline my life's work and call that my made-up, independently designed major.
Okay.
For which I'm probably not that employable other than by myself, because it's a fairly unique...
I'm an English major, so I get it.
It's a pretty unique thing. But then, very shortly after I graduated, I moved to the East Bay, actually, and started doing work in the East Bay and in San Francisco. And then I started partnering with the National Park Service in 2008. And then I started partnering with the San Francisco Recreation and Parks in 2017. So I've worked almost exclusively in public parks and civic spaces since. We
can talk more about that as we dig into this production for sure, because that's an interesting angle to me and compelling as hell. So that's the history of We Players.
Yeah, so that's how we got started.
Okay.
And a long time ago, actually 2008, I did a production at Fort Point, which is a Civil War fort under the Golden Gate Bridge. And that was our first partnership with the National Park Service. I went on to have a 3-year residency on Alcatraz, which was the first of its kind from 2009 to 2011.
Wow.
That's when I started to get in really deep with the National Park Service and continued to work with them after that, including a production of Macbeth at Fort Point in 2013.
Okay.
However, that production was shut down due to a government shutdown in the middle of our sold-out run.
How the times don't change.
Correct. So we ended up remounting that show 6 months later in the spring of 2014 because that sold-out show had been kind of literally hijacked by the government, shut down, and was invited by the new superintendent of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, David Smith, who's a wonderful visionary in the National Park Service, to consider remounting that production. And he had asked far enough in advance of our 25th anniversary that I had a chance to really think about whether it would be a good fit and really consider that that would be a pretty special way to celebrate a fairly major achievement for a nonprofit arts organization to reach 25 years.
A quarter of a damn century. That's
crazy.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Or very rarely.
And then while thinking about how to do the show and how to do it similarly but differently.
From the 2014 production,
From the 2014
you mean?
production.
Yeah.
I would say one of the first things to fall into place that let me know, yes, I should do this, and yes, it is a different version, was when Ann and I were having Zoom visits, dates over the summer.
Sure.
Anne will tell you more, perhaps, but she goes on these epic long walks. And when I mean long walk, I mean like hundreds of miles. And so
Like
thousands.
in England or
All over the world.
or
All over the world.
All over
Yeah,
the world.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah. Yeah.
Do we need to come back to that?
No,
Okay,
necessarily,
'cause that's
except
fascinating.
that I was on one of my epic walks.
And so every 100 days, you were taking a
I was
rest day.
taking a rest day,
Right.
and we were connecting. And
Or every 100 miles.
Every 100 miles. I would get a hotel or a whatever B&B ish. Yeah, and we've known each other for so long, and we just had one of our every few months. We get. And anyway, Ava said that she was doing this play, and then I was just walking and thinking for 8 to 10 hours every day, and I thought, and so I texted her the next day. It's like, do you have a lady yet? Because we have wanted to do something together for years, but I left theater and was working in the film industry as a visual effects producer, and very
She's very good at her job, and it's very, very hard.
Yeah.
and I kept, how many times I said, just one more movie, I'm just going to do
Right.
one more
For
movie.
at least 25 of the
Finally-
30 years you made movies.
I finally got to the point that summer when I was like, I can't, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was suddenly free.
Yeah.
And she was doing this play. Not only was she directing and producing the play, but also was going to play Macbeth. And
So it wasn't maybe obvious when you decided to walk away from movies that you were going to end up
not at all.
at least the first thing.
No.
Until this
happened.
meeting
And then
happened, yeah.
I just texted you, and then we mulled it over, and then it was, I don't know, you can go what your thought process was. I was convinced that it was the right thing to do, and then you had your thought process around it. And
Yeah, it felt very magical and profound to have the opportunity. I admit that I definitely had let's immediately talk about all the potential problems. Because, Anne was my mentor when I was 12 years old and learned all this foundational to my artistic practice work from Anne between 12 and 15. And although we've evolved and grown over the years into friends, I call her my mentor, sister, mother, friend, because she is all of those roles to me. And so I think I was just a little nervous and wanted to address, will I be able to be the director, the producer? I run this company. Like, I am, we're very close, but just wanted to kind of talk through potential pitfalls so that we would be a unified front, so that it felt like it would be conducive, so that I felt like I was going to have the space to have the directorial control that I needed, but also was so thrilled at the prospect of being supported both in performing alongside Anne. Now we're playing Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, but that also Anne agreed to be my text coach, which means that I get directorial outside eye support from Anne, which is of course really helpful anytime, but especially when you're playing a role that is in a lot of the scenes and has a lot of language to speak.
Ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's.
But also, what's really interesting is we found, we didn't really need to talk about a lot of that stuff. It was like the first impulse, and then it was just like, oh, actually, it's just going to be okay, and it has been.
And we got to also test it out a little bit because
Right.
I asked Anne if she could come for the audition process, so that we could have at least that much opportunity to kind of stretch out and remember again how we work together, and then also have her here as part of the casting process, because casting is very alchemical. It's not just the individual talent. Lots of actors I know are so talented they could play any number of roles, but it has so much to do about the larger constellation, and that's when it was an emergent part of the audition process that this would be an all female identifying and non-binary cast.
I was just about to inquire about that aspect of it all. So We Players is not
No.
the company is not of that?
Well, we
Or
are run by
run by
women.
women.
My associate producer, Britt Lauer, and our office manager, Stacey Davis. We're the three, and myself, we're the three full-time employees of the company, and we're all female identifying. But no, we work with all sorts of people. I mean, I've always been very gender blind, as it were, with casting. I myself played Henry V when I was 18 years old, so I learned early on that anybody can play the parts, and part of the thing with Shakespeare is that he writes these dynamic, multidimensional human beings, and anything that's any of us can experience or feel within the breadth of human experience is in Shakespeare's characters. Also, traditionally, it was all men who performed Shakespeare plays, and so we just happened to be, in this case, all female, playing all these parts.
So we had that idea to do this, and why now? You know, like, or I should say then, because this didn't just happen yesterday.
Right. Well, you know, there's a lot of. It's interesting because there's things that we know in advance when we go, or think we know in advance when we go into a project, and then there's things that reveal themselves. And I think so much of what's interesting to me about being an artist is being in that ongoing dance of making the work and letting the work make me, of efforting, but of also responding and listening. So initially, I was responding to this invitation from the new superintendent to return to Fort Point. I wanted to do something really special for our 25th anniversary, and Macbeth at Fort Point that we did in 2013, 2014 is certainly one of our all-time crowd favorites.
Okay.
And I've certainly had people over the years talk about that over and over again and ask if we'd ever do it again. And even people at the park saying that people come to Fort Point regularly and talk about having seen that show a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
So it felt like the scale and the space and the interest all felt on par with this kind of anniversary moment. But I think some of the things that have really, you know, at the time I decided to do it, it was pre-election, and I was hoping for a different outcome. And regardless of the outcome, this play is one that I wish would become irrelevant, but has not yet. And unfortunately,
is it roughly 400 years old or so?
Yeah.
Like, right. Okay.
Over,
It was written.
A little over 400 years. It was, you know, there's lots of subtle arguments within the Shakespearean scholarship, whether it was first published in 1606 or a little later. But yes.
But the story is from the 12th century.
Right.
So
800.
And we're
900.
And we're in a Civil War fortress.
Yeah.
Right.
In modern day San Francisco. So there's a lot of different historical time periods kind of colliding and overlapping. And, you know, fundamentally, this is a story about two human beings who make really selfish choices, and those choices are their undoing. And I think something we're trying to bring to this production is that humanity, and that this is not a play about a sociopath who's beyond redemption before it even starts. It's a story about a fallible man with ambitions and desires shared by his wife. She doesn't make him do anything. The witches don't make him do anything, but certainly our people who are closest to us, their influence matters, and they are unmade and both go mad, one by sort of, well, I can speak more to my thoughts about that in a moment, but that both characters, I think in many ways model to us a cautionary tale that if we are able to connect with their humanity is a relevant, actionable cautionary tale versus like an academic or literary one, meaning that there's the possibility to take away from this that the future's not foretold and our actions are ours and we have agency, and that our sphere of influence can be very small or very large, but what matters is what the quality of that influence is, whether it is in our inner circles or on a broader stage.
It was really important to me to playing Lady Macbeth, not to just do a caricature, the evil queen, the witchy queen, the evil, because I feel like in life as well, it's really easy. It can be easy to look at someone and say, oh, that person is just bad. They're just a bad human being, but nobody is just bad.
Right.
Even people that I look at now in the world and I think that person is just bad. It's like, well, they're not, actually.
There's more, usually a little more to it.
There's usually a little bit more.
Right.
I like to hope that there's a little bit more to it. While there isn't redemption in this play, I like to think that while we're on the journey, that the possibility is still there, that the possibility is still there, and then it's not. So that's been really an interesting journey. I mean, we keep talking about it's a tragic love story.
Mm-hmm.
And in
ways.
Shakespeare's plays, in a way, they're all love stories,
Yeah.
because it's the love that we don't have, or the love that we're missing, or the wrong kind of love, or
Unrequited. Or
unrequited,
what?
or I mean, even in Richard III, which is arguably one of the most horrific characters, right along with Macbeth, he tells us in the very first speech of the whole play why he is how he is. Now, those explanations are not excuses, but they are insights into a person, and that is a big part, I think, of what art is supposed to help us with, to help us expand outside of our own grooved ways of thinking, to help us see the world and each other in a new way. And as Anne, you were just saying, that there are people right now that it's easy to look at, for me, and have a very strong opinion about. And I try to challenge myself with, surely that person loves somebody. Surely that person, brushes their teeth. Like, what is the place where we can connect? And how do we rebuild towards each other? So it's interesting to be kind of having this conversation with the artistic team and with the cast while doing a play that is a gory horror story. And I think one of my other intentions in doing this play is to tell this gory horror story, and internally amongst the cast have as much care and love and kindness as possible, which is a big part of how I work with We Players anyway, trying to really create communities of care, which is both, energetic and spiritual, as well as practical. When we're working in these very rugged environments that are so demanding physically, we have to be a strong team that are there to, in some cases, literally hold each other up. So I think that, there's a reason to do it, just because it's incredible language and Shakespeare's always worth spending time with. But now there are even more reasons and layers of relevance. And I think while the all-femme aspect of the show was emergent from the audition process, it did become a conscious decision. And part of that conscious decision is to highlight and give voice to people who are often underrepresented. Most of our cast lots of our cast members are queer, non-binary, femme, people of color, and there's an opportunity that we have to give more voice and attention to people that often just don't get cast in these roles.
Right. I'm not religious, but amen.
Yeah. And are being wiped from history right now.
Quite literally.
Literally wiped from history.
I mean,
so on that big level, and then also on that small level of people just being like, I'm never even considered for Macduff or for, whatever it is in this play.
This question, I do with it what you will, but, think about it if you need to. But so 10-ish years removed from the last production that you've done of Macbeth, at Fort Point, right? How is it different?
Yeah.
And I swear, I'm not. I don't mean this lightly. It's just like sometimes we have to laugh at what is happening. Anyway, so in your words.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll speak to what's different about this iteration of the play.
Yes, please.
To start with, which is it's a different cast, and there are as many versions of Hamlet or Macbeth as there are actors to play them.
Right.
And that's part of why we keep doing it 450 plus years later, is that there is no ultimate final version of Hamlet or Macbeth. So it's a new cast. Our costume designer, Brooke Jennings, is quite brilliant. I've worked with her since 2015. She is very generously, and I think it's very cool that she's taking our costumes from the last version 10+ years ago, as well as costumes from other shows, some of which she designed, some of which she didn't. And she's really going into the We Players costume archive and pulling out pieces and making new pieces and sort of iterating on old pieces to make them new, which is just a cool thing to do in terms of resource use, but is also very cool in terms of our 25th anniversary.
I was just gonna say,
that there are these pieces that have been in radically different shows. She's building new pieces as well, but it's just very cool the way she's working.
And you're drawing from your own literal history.
Exactly.
And bringing it to that's awesome.
That's a similar thing with the weapons. We have an amazing person that works with us, JD Durst, who does many things. He's a very talented maker, but he does our weapons and our leather work. And some of those are actually the same that we've used 10 years ago, but then some of those items are new. The route through the space is pretty similar. And just to speak to that for a moment, in a We Players show, the audience is on their feet and they follow the show throughout the environment.
Okay.
So you're walking from location to location. Whether that is mileage or stairs just depends on the space. So when we were on Angel Island, you're walking 5 miles. Here at Fort Point, it's not so much distance as it is levels up and down 3 flights of stairs.
I was going to ask if you could, I don't think I'm the only San Franciscan who has never been inside of, like I've been outside a million times with the handprint and all that stuff. But what can you tell us about the environment inside of Fort Point?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I can tell you that you will be happiest at the show or just visiting Fort Point if you wear 2 layers of wool minimum.
Right.
And bring your like Arctic winter coat or your skiing coat. It's really, really cold there. And it is no joke, although it is kind of funny, that it is literally 10 degrees colder inside.
I believe
and
that,
windier inside than just outside the doors.
Right.
There's this kind of wind funnel action that happens and it's right there at the mouth of the gate. So it's very windy, it's very cold, it's very foggy. You're inside of a cloud. It's very atmospheric and moody.
The bridge literally sings. And the foghorns and the traffic and the boom, 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 boom. So.
Yeah.
And the Weird Sisters actually have a note that is the note that the bridge sings. Our music director and composer has worked with us since 2010. And he incorporates, it's funny, he's got his tuning forks in his pockets and he'll listen to the foghorn and take it out and figure out which note it is.
Stoked to hear this because I think about those kinds of things. I live close enough to the bridge that when it sings, I can hear it, and I'm like, I wonder what note that is.
Yeah,
and
Charlie
someone
can tell you.
More talented than me has figured it out. That's amazing. Okay.
So those are some kind of atmospheric aspects of the space, and it really feels like as close to cold, windy Scotland that we could be and still be in San Francisco.
Right.
But I'll also add that it is a marvel of masonry and architecture. So I really encourage people to look up while they're in the fort. The brickwork is so sophisticated and it's almost like a cathedral, the way the vaulted ceilings and the arches sort of flow into each other. It's an incredibly impressive structure.
It's old too. Pre-06 earthquake?
Yeah, so it was built for the Civil War.
Withstood at
1850s.
at least 2 major earthquakes there on the edge of the world.
Yeah.
And it was
That's
actually going to be
amazing.
torn down when they were going to build the Golden Gate Bridge, but luckily...
Early activists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Early activists were able
Love
to, speak to how important it was as a historical and architectural object or space, and the arch that was built over it. If you look at next time you look at the bridge, notice that there is a very specific arch that is over the fort that is not on the north side of the bridge, because that arch was built in order to protect the fort while building the bridge. And there's also old photographs of the building of the bridge that have all these like Model Ts and stuff parked inside the fort.
Yes.
That was like during the building of the
I'll
fort.
definitely go look at that in person at some point, but I also have a schematic of the bridge, and I've never noticed that, but I will look at it literally when I go home after this recording.
That's very cool.
Okay, we're kind of coming up on time for me. I want you to share with folks when is the production starting? How, where can they get tickets, et cetera, all the things that a listener might need to know if they want to see this show, and I want them to see this show.
Yeah, it's pretty special. It is April 11th to May 18th. All shows start at 6 o'clock. Audiences do need to be there by 5:30, 5:45. There's a fair amount of how to prepare so that you can safely navigate the fortress. It's, as we said, very immersive. And we run through, so April 11th to May 18th. Tickets are available at weplayers.org, as well as lots of other information about the show and other work that we've done and have upcoming. So weplayers.org. And a couple more weeks of rehearsal. And it's going really well. We have such an incredible team, both on the crew side as well as the design side, as well as the actors. So it's a real honor and privilege and joy to work with this group of people.
Nice. And it's going to be every day, rain or shine, no matter, right?
Rain or shine, windstorm, fog, whatever.
Yes.
But it is, most weeks it's Thursday through Sunday.
Thursday through
There's
Sunday,
a couple of
thanks.
exceptions, and all those details are listed out quite quite clearly on the website. But yes, most weeks Thursday to Sunday. There's a few weeks that we have just Friday to Sunday shows. 22
Okay.
performances in all. A few of them are already sold out. So please jump on it. And I actually just want to add that during the pandemic, we adopted something that we're now calling tiered ticketing for equitable access.
Awesome.
Which is 3 different levels for every single show. And people just choose those that can afford more. We encourage you to buy the support level. That helps subsidize the subsidized level. And then there's kind of the middle tier, which is sort of the quote unquote market rate for the ticket price. So we invite people to choose the level that best works for them. And hope you all listening come check us out. It's quite an adventure.
That was Ava Roy and Ann Podlozny from We Players. For more information on how you can experience Macbeth at Fort Point, go to weplayers.org. And check back next week here for part 2 with Woody LaBounty, which drops next Tuesday wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was created, curated, and produced by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in the 7th season, we have more than 250 episodes available wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out the refreshed website, which I'm still working hard to repopulate with all the episodes. That's storiedsf.com. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. You can also rate us on Spotify. Find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at storiedsf. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay weird, stay informed, keep your eyes open, and we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.